First thing I want to make clear is that I am more than just a casual fan of the Godzilla series. I had all the toys as a kid, I read all the Arthur Adams comics, and I can correctly identify the Showa, Heisei, and Millennium Godzillas just by looking at them. I subscribe to Cosmovoid for crying out loud, and although there are plenty of Godzilla films that I just don't spark to, the ones I really like. I say all this to sedate any fanboy suspicions that my appreciation for the American Godzilla remake of 1998 stems from my having no appreciation for the Godzilla series as a whole.
And it's Gojira, you moron!
On the contrary, I'm a big fan of the OG Godzilla aesthetic, overcranking the camera while two dudes in rubber suits duke it out, introducing one single recurring human character across a 30-plus film series for the sole purpose of having someone who can psychically induce Godzilla to do things that are convenient for the plot.
Godzilla!
Utilizing the same musical cue across a dozen different films. I dig it. Most of the Godzilla films are at least either goofy entertainment or poignantly allegorical, and the best of them are both. And I get it, fellow G fans. Godzilla 98 does anything but capture the traditional spirit of the original series, and as such, it's the last film I would ever recommend to a total Godzilla newbie. But if you've already seen a couple Godzilla films and you know what he's all about, then I don't think this film is anything but a good time. In fact, I think it's better than the franchise mean.
Come on, man, I ought to be talking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, 5 seconds, doesn't freaking matter, because I'm gonna bust you up.
To prove it to you, I'm gonna do something a little different with this episode of Schlock Awe. I'm gonna compare the American Godzilla remake of 1998 to the American Godzilla remake of 2014, which seemed to go way out of its way to try and preserve the classic Godzilla aesthetic, and yet still managed to be... I don't want to say terrible. I don't want to tell anyone they're not allowed to like it. That seems to be completely antithetical to the Schlock Awe zeitgeist. But this film did not once make me wonder what was going to happen next. I didn't care about any of the characters. Were any of them ever even at cross purposes with each other? I mean, sure, it maintained Godzilla's plantigrade stance, but is that all that a Godzilla film needs to do in order to score a 74% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes? I guess this is the great litmus test of the Godzilla fandom. Do you come to this series for the fun stories, or for the weaponized intertextual nostalgia?
I understood that reference.
Now with all that said, I'm more than happy to concede that everything I'm about to say isn't so much an attempt to change or discredit anyone else's opinion, so much as it is an attempt to articulate my own. Man, did I go to college or what? So Godzilla 98 begins with this fantastically foreboding title sequence, bolstered by footage of actual nuclear tests from the 1950s, and by David Arnold's incomparable score. Godzilla 2014 tried to parrot this style, even going so far as to reuse some of the exact same atomic test footage. But it all just feels sorta been there, done that. Like they didn't have any ideas of their own to incorporate. The first act of Godzilla 98 follows geeky zoologist Nick
Papadopoulos. It's the Topolis.
As he investigates the ominous calling cards that Godzilla leaves behind as he crosses the Pacific, hikes over the Isthmus of Panama, and Katie Ledecky's his way up the eastern American seaboard.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm a biologist. I take radioactive samples and I study them.
That's great. Here's your sample. Study it.
What sample?
You're standing in it.
I don't see it.
I think most everyone agrees that this section of the film is really well done. Super ominous and moody.
I don't see it.
The only complaint that I've heard consistently is with the running gag where nobody can pronounce Nick's last name.
Dr. Nico Papadopoulos?
It's the Topolis.
Whatever.
But hey, at least we remember his last name. Go ahead, I'll give you a Sacagawea gold dollar if you can tell me Aaron Taylor Johnson's character's name from Godzilla 2014. So Godzilla arrives in the Big Apple at the end of the first act, and at this point, the movie decides to play coy with his appearance in a way that I really enjoy. The marketing campaign had deliberately refused to reveal what the Godzilla redesign looked like up until this point. So all these tantalizing partial views built up a ton of anticipation before we finally got our first good look at him at the start of the second act. Godzilla 2014 again tries to ape this style, hiding a good look at the big guy up until the halfway point of the film, but it's just so wrong here. For one thing, Godzilla 2014 looks exactly like a CGI version of the original Godzilla, so there's no reason to keep the audience guessing as to what he looks like. There's no surprise waiting for us once he's finally revealed. Secondly, and far more problematically, when the filmmakers finally do run out of smoke, water, and weird camera angles with which to hide the big guy, they just up and end the scene. Over and over again. If Emmerich had played by the same rules, Godzilla would have come ashore in New York, would have gotten one quick look at him, and then they would have just cut straight to the aftermath. So after Godzilla's arrival, the military regroups and hatches a plot to try and lure him to his death. But it doesn't work. They actually hatch several plots to try and lure him to his death, one of which results in what is probably the coolest helicopter action sequence ever filmed, before they finally take him out with a pair of submarines.
Direct hit!
At that point, Nick realizes Godzilla's probably laid eggs somewhere else in the city.
He's pregnant.
He is?
He. A very unusual he.
Hey, you don't think YouTube will age restrict this video what with all this talk about an asexual gender-swapping dinosaur, do you? But the military's had enough of it.
Pack your stuff, mister. You're officially off this project as of now.
So Nick teams up with his old college girlfriend, Jean Reno, and Hank Azaria to help find and destroy the nest. This leads to one hell of a third act in which the kitchen scene from Jurassic Park is stretched out to nearly half an hour, followed by a final chase through the city as a not quite dead Godzilla tries to kill them all for hurting his babies. Simply put, I love this script. It's one of the most competent run-away from monster movies I've ever seen, full of dramatic reversals and fun surprises.
Stop counting.
I remember people complaining about how the last act owed more to Jurassic Park than it did Godzilla, but I didn't mind, because it's not like the original Japanese Godzilla films didn't borrow heavily from mainstream Hollywood blockbusters.
Go ahead! Make my day.
Make my day.
Other people thought the humor fell flat.
That's a lot of fish.
But it's not like the original Godzilla films didn't have some really weird attempts at humor too.
Shall we report it, sir? What, that we're being invaded by little green men from outer space? Let's just keep it as our secret. You can tell your son about it when he's born. Major Spielberg?
And while I wouldn't go so far as to call this film character-driven, I'd certainly call it character-populated, and I think that's all you really need for a Godzilla film.
Where did you find this guy? He's from France.
A good rule of thumb when writing a monster movie is to give every character a desire besides mere survival. Here we've got characters who want romantic closure, career gains, to save the reputation of his country, and revenge for the Knicks.
Oh, man. Now I'm pissed.
Godzilla 2014, on the other hand, is not character-populated. Bryan Cranston was good, but he died at the end of the first act. The rest of the film follows the breathtakingly indistinct Aaron Taylor Johnson as he tries to reunite with his breathtakingly indistinct family by volunteering for every superfluous suicide mission he can get his hands on. I mean, he's a bomb disposal expert who doesn't dispose of any bombs. Do you recall what anyone wanted in this film besides survival? Come to think of it, I don't even know what Monarch's purpose was. They tried to stop the Mutos for a little while, but then they just decided to let Godzilla take care of them, and they didn't seem too concerned about what Godzilla was gonna do to the city after he won. You put all this together, the rote script, the passive characters, the lack of any stakes, and as far as I'm concerned, Godzilla 2014 is just a $160 million trailer for the legendary MonsterVerse, not a story. So why is so much hate directed at this film? From what I gather, it basically just boils down to whether or not you think this creature counts as Godzilla. 3 core attributes were taken away from the big guy, and most Godzilla fans have never stood for it. So let's take a quick look at the missing traits to see whether or not this deserves to be called an official Godzilla film. First and foremost is Godzilla's overall appearance. Even the most casual Godzilla fan will be able to tell you that the name Gojira is a combination of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale, which seems like a pretty good way to describe Godzilla if you can't name any reptiles, whereas the new Godzilla looks more like a cross between an iguana and a T-Rex. I'll be the first to admit that these changes to Godzilla's appearance make this feel less like a Godzilla film than any other installment in the series. But isn't the whole point of a reboot to buck tradition? Besides, as radical as the new design is, I never thought the original design made much sense, given Godzilla's origins as an irradiated dinosaur. I mean, it certainly works, don't get me wrong, it works really well. But his original design seemed more to me like the result of production limitations rather than any specific creative decisions. And according to Wikipedia, in the 2001 film Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, Toho was originally going to make Godzilla walk with his back parallel to the ground, just like the '98 Godzilla, but they decided against it because it would have put too much strain on the actor's back. So see, Godzilla's posture was never sacred, it was merely customary. Then there's the atomic breath. I'll be the first to admit, I was more than a little disappointed to see this feature go. It's undeniably cool. But it's not like the 2014 Godzilla was any better for keeping it in. In that film, Godzilla trades punches with not Mothra and not Batra for the first 3/4 of the film before he finally remembers he even has this ability, at which point he insta-kills them both. It's Deus Ex Machina in the worst way. Finally, there's the question of Godzilla's quasi-immortality. The general consensus among fans is that Godzilla cannot be killed by the military, period. But this sort of blanket declaration doesn't mean much without any context or justification. In the original Gojira, Japan has to resort to an experimental oxygen destroyer to kill Godzilla, which has a sort of dramatic irony to it. Godzilla was birthed by an experimental superweapon that had been used to defeat Japan in 1945, and now here Japan has to develop its own experimental superweapon in order to take him out. As such, I always felt like the oxygen destroyer was specifically Japan's thing. If Emmerich had inserted some half-ass shot of some missiles with the words oxygen destroyer slapped onto them, it would have come across as hackneyed and trite. Instead, we get a squadron of F-18s making pass after pass at Godzilla, who is himself a byproduct of Cavalier Western weapons testing, killing him slowly but inexorably with a seemingly endless supply of technologically superior firepower. Does this not sound like the perfect metaphor for the American military machine? Bottom line, when it comes to Godzilla's death, the important thing for me isn't who or what finally takes him out, just so long as it's incredibly hard to pull off and incredibly hard to watch. With all that said, I'm more than happy to extend an olive branch to my fellow G-fans out there who still can't abide the thought of a digitigrade Godzilla that doesn't belch radioactive fire. I'm happy to refer to Godzilla '98 as an unofficial remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, instead of an official remake of Gojira, just so long as everyone else admits that this film is actually really fun and inventive for what it is. There would even be a bit of dramatic irony in that, since the original Godzilla was a sort of unauthorized Japanese remake of 20,000 Fathoms. Alright, I think I've spoken my piece. It's time to hand out an award. Godzilla 1998 gets the St. Rita Award. Because it's a reimagining of an old classic that might violate some unwritten rules about what the original is supposed to be, but if you just sit back and take it in, you'll find that there's plenty to enjoy. Plus, it's green. Hey, thanks for watching everybody. In addition to Twitter and Tumblr, you can now follow me on Instagram. You can find the links in the description below. Hey, guess what? In the 6 weeks since I uploaded my feature film debut, Second Service, to my YouTube channel, it has grown from just under 11,000 subscribers to over 17,000. That is incredibly encouraging and humbling, and I really can't thank you guys enough. And I've got about a dozen videos coming down the pipe just as fast as I can produce them. I know from my analytics that most of my new subscribers came here from my sexist tropes videos, and I promise not all my future videos will be about Godzilla, but I hope you enjoyed this one anyway, and that maybe now you'll give some of the old Toho films a try. Till then, let me know in the comments what you did and didn't like about Godzilla 98. And if you love Godzilla 2014, I want to hear about it. Maybe I'm just not watching it in the way it's supposed to be watched. Till then, thanks for watching and subscribing, and stay tuned. Fun fact, if you type Godzilla jump into the YouTube search engine, the first result will be the Halo jump from Godzilla 2014, but the second result will be, of course,